Hey, what's up? John Sonmez here from SimpleProgrammer.com. So this is going to be one of those guy videos. You can queue up the guy video playlist here. I'm going to be talking to you guys, although, you know, if you're not a guy, feel free to listen in. You might learn something. You might find it entertaining. But primarily, I'm going to address this video to you guys out there because I've been dealing with what I think is quite an interesting thing. In fact, a lot of young gentlemen have been coming up to me and basically saying, will you be my dad? And, and what I mean by that, you know, I don't mean to be offensive by that, but what I mean by that is they've been asking questions along the lines of, I don't feel like a man. How do I feel like a man? How do I become a man, right? I don't have a very good father figure. Even my own father is not a very good father figure. Just doesn't feel, he's a great guy and everything, but not very masculine. Hasn't really taught me what it is to be a man, right? That's part of the reason why I actually created a lot of these videos on this channel and that playlist dealing with being a guy and guy type of issues, because I feel like there is not very much today in society for men to learn how to become men and kind of good, solid, masculine role models that we can follow and look up to. But what I want to address today is sort of that problem, the problem of not having a passage, a rites of initiation for manhood, for a lot of you guys out there that feel like you're not a man. You just don't feel like that manliness, and you don't know why. You don't know what's going on. You feel like your friends are manly or masculine, and you're not, and you feel like they are men, and you still feel like a boy. You still feel like you're not quite a man, like you're somewhere in between. I know that a lot of you are struggling with this, right? So I'm going to give you, in this video, I'm going to talk about what I think is the age today of becoming a man, which might shock some of you. And I want to talk about this in general and a little bit of tips on how you can do this, how to facilitate this process and to gain some confidence in your masculinity, in your manhood today. So first of all, let's talk about the age. This is something that's really interesting, and I've gathered this from several pieces of evidence, right, including my own life experience, right, which you can probably see over the course of my videos on YouTube. You can probably see what I'm going to talk about here in a second as far as age goes of manhood, and also from a lot of books that I've read, and also from talking with other guys and watching what I've observed. But I believe pretty firmly today that the average male becomes a man or starts to initiate that process of manhood around the age of 33. That's right, around the age of 33 or 34. Now this is kind of interesting. Some of you right now are like, what the hell are you talking about? But there's a bunch of you that right now that your heart just skipped 2 beats. And I know it because you're like, holy fuck, you're right, dude. Like you're like 36 and you're like, I can't believe you're saying this, because that's me. Or you're right there. You're 33 right now and you're like, I am just now like going through that process, and I'm feeling these changes, and it's weird, and it's like I'm suddenly awakening to this deeper purpose and this deeper self of mine. This is, you know, again, for some of you, you're not going to have this experience. And also I want to say this, that I would say that a majority of males do not go through this process, do not at 33 become men. They stay in the boyhood adolescent phase of life, of their spiritual and to some degree physical maturity for their entire life. And they never actually go through that transition today. Now, in the past, I believe that's different. I didn't live in the past, but from what I've read, from the stories, from what I know about the past, I believe that not only was the age different, I believe the age was somewhere more around like 16 years old, depending on what era you look at in history and where the rites of initiation, rites of passage for manhood were. But I believe today, like I said, majority are not actually passing into manhood. Majority of guys do not become what I would consider to be a man. And the ones that do, like I said, I feel like for a majority that awakening, that process starts to begin somewhere around that age of 33 and 34. And it's really weird. I encountered it myself right around that age. I have encountered many other men that have gone through that process. And as I've read books on masculinity and manhood and whatnot, I have found that it seems like a lot of the authors actually are talking about that age, or they were that age, or something like that. And it's very interesting, very, very weird how that is happening. I cannot exactly explain it or what caused that set of circumstances. Now, what I found, at least for myself, what triggered that, or I don't know exactly what triggered that, but I sort of was at this place where up until that point, I would say that I just did not feel like, I didn't feel like, I don't want to say an adult, but really a man. Like I felt like I was an adult, but I didn't feel very, very confident in my own masculinity. And so I sort of had this feeling that I need to go and explore this and figure this out and find this myself. And it was almost like I was called to that. And then I went on this quest, and that quest has taken me here. And it's still a quest that I'm still on, that I'm progressing through, but there's night and day change, at least in me, in many ways, from physical appearance to how I sound, my voice, to my behaviors and actions and my thinking and all of that, and all sort of started to really happen around that age of 33. So that's my shocking news. And like I said, some of you, I know there's going to be a ton of comments on this, because a lot of you are just going to be like, holy shit, dude, I cannot believe that, because it's going to resonate with you, because I know it, because it resonated with me. And the fact that I'm saying that, I can say that with pretty strong confidence, because I know that this is something that is true, and it's fuzzy, it's out there, but it's hard to put your finger on it, but I know that this is true. Now, let's address some of the issues, some of the ways that you can develop this manhood. What can you do to actually pass into this? And so what I want to talk about is, first of all, the changes, the idea, what's wrong with society that has caused this sort of delayed evolution or change to manhood in men today. And I think that there's a few different factors. I think one of them is, like I said, we don't really have a rites of initiation. Our lives are not really in danger. We don't really belong to tribes as much anymore. So we don't have this rites of passage, rites of initiation that men used to go through. It was a very tribal thing. Or even before we had tribes, we had a lot of war. We had a lot of fighting, even when we didn't have tribes, even in the last probably 100 years, right? If you think about it, you think about, like, in the United States, the Civil War, and you had 14, 15-year-old kids going to battle. They were becoming men. You look at it today and you say, oh, those were kids. Yeah, but they weren't, because see, they had to become men very quickly, and they did. And that was that rite of initiation, that passage, and the expectations that were put on them early on caused them to go through that process. So right now, I think one of the key problems is that we don't have that process, okay? Another one is that we just have this weakening of the masculine element within society. There's a lot of societal pressures. We live in a time of abundance and peace for the most part. And so a lot of well-meaning people want to take aggression out of society. They want to take, and it's not just aggression, but it's all the elements of masculinity. Now, some things can be twisted to bad, just like anything, but they want to really try and beat everyone up and say, hey, you're promoting a rape culture and chivalry and all of these things. These are chauvinists and sexist, and they really want to make everyone try to be the same instead of recognizing the differences. And unfortunately, what ends up happening in that case many times is that it's not just making people the same or equal. What it is it's really demasculating men, because the more desired element in society, and for a peaceful society to function, is a femininity, right? There's problems when there's masculinity, right? There's problems when you get a couple of alpha dogs in the same cage. You have problems. You can have a lot of females in that cage, right? Female dogs, and you're not necessarily going to have an issue necessarily, but you get those guys together, and what happens? So it makes sense that society would try and suppress this. There's a lot of other reasons I could go into depth into what I've observed, but in general, masculinity is being seen as a toxic thing. There's not a rites of initiation, and I would say one last thing, major point, is that there's just not positive masculine role models. There's less fathers, there's there's less of that, of fathers doing work with their hands, of going and fighting and teaching their sons things. They're spending a lot of time at work typing at a computer and not really doing those kind of things that bring out that masculine element within men. So they're not training their young men to be men, and that's can be a serious problem. So what can be done about it for you if you are a man trying to find your way, if you don't feel like you're a man and you want to, you're on this path, you want to come out on the other side, you don't maybe have the positive masculine role model, you don't have a rite of initiation, what can you do yourself? I'll probably go into the topic more in depth, but I want to give you a few introductions and then give you a couple of books and resources that I think will help you. So the first one is, I would say that you need to understand what it is. And I'm going to give you two books that I think will help you to best identify and understand this, for what masculinity is and what its purpose is and what it looks like, because you don't see a lot of that. You see a lot of warped perceptions of that. So the first one is a book called Iron John. I believe it's by Robert Bly. It's a good book. It's an old book. It's a little bit hard to understand, but it's worth the read. Bear with it. It goes through a fairy tale and sort of explains the mythology behind it. I think it's worth the read. The second one I would say is a book by Jack Donovan, and it's called The Way of Men, and it really takes a hard look at what it means to be a man. I don't agree necessarily with some of the things that he says in the book, but for the most part, I mean, he hits the nail on the head, and he really makes a distinction between a good man and a man, and that there is a difference, and they're not necessarily the same thing, that you can still be a man and not be a good man, right? And he really doesn't sugarcoat things. I like what he says there. So I would start with those two books. I think that's a very good resource. One of the key things, at least for me, was that I had to overcome my fears. And if you think about this, this makes a lot of sense, right? I'm thinking about this backwards logically for what happened to me. And I was a very fearful person. I've talked about this a lot. I was afraid to fly in airplanes, so I was afraid to go on roller coasters. I was really not confronting a lot of things in life, and I was hiding. And if you think about it from a rites of initiation, rites of passage type of viewpoint, it makes sense, because what are those kids doing, those boys doing, when if you've heard of a rite of initiation ceremony, they're usually going to be faced with some incredible fear, and then having to face it on their own, have to overcome that fear and step into it, really lean into it and come out the other end. So it's a very frightful process, right? The normal rites of initiation, because it's really about making that choice. It's about finding courage. And I've said this many times before, I'll say it again, that courage is not the lack of fear. It's not the absence of fear. It's action in spite of fear. And this is something that I didn't understand for a while. And it was something I had to understand to go through that transformation of what I would consider to be manhood, is that I have to face my fears, and they have to be scary to me, yet I still have to take action in order for me to actually step into that role of manhood, which is one of courage. It is required to have courage to be a man, I believe. Okay, so that is one thing I would recommend, is that you start facing these fears. You start making a list of the things that you're afraid of, and you start actually combating these things and facing fear and going after fear as soon as it starts to take hold in your life. Right now, if something scares me, I am very likely to go and attack that fear right away, especially if it debilitates me in any way or causes me any kind of harm or prevents me from doing something that I want to do. I'm going to attack that. I am not going to let it take any part of my life, because it is a virtue. Courage is a virtue that is very important to me, and it's something that will benefit you greatly in your life. So I would say that is really important. The other thing I would say is that you need to be, and I talked about this, I did a video on being strong. And again, I'm not going to go too far into depth here, because I've talked about this a few different times, and I don't want to make this an hour-long video, although I easily could. But what I mean by this is that I believe that you have to become someone who can let go and be detached from things and yet still be present. This is a sort of weird, almost contradiction, a very tough thing to do, which is a lot of boys, a lot of people, myself included at one period of time, instead of dealing with harm and pain and all of these things, what I would do is shut down. It's called stonewalling. It's basically where you're not feeling emotions. It's being apathetic. And so in that case, what you're doing is a very weak position. It's one that is sort of feigning strength, right? You think that it's stronger than just being weak and crying, but it's actually worse because you're actually shutting out. You're not present at all. You're gone. You're disconnected. You're somewhere else. You're apathetic to the world. So you're unable to give your gifts, give your love to the world, which is what a man needs to do, is to be able to bring in that love, that gift, the gifts that he has, which is being present, is being fully there. And so the less fully there you are, the less manhood that you have. And the solution to that is to be able to be disconnected, what I mean by that is to be able to not care about the outcome of things, to be able to separate yourself mentally from what's happening. Again, it's like trusting the process, right? To separate divorce results from actions so that you can act logically, so that you can operate in the situation, but to still fully feel and be present in that same situation, right? So I could give you, example of the extremes, right? On the one extreme of just being not disconnected, being so attached, would be on that side of it, it would be being very sappy and mushy and weak and needy and clingy and, being sick in love with someone you can't have, and being all very, very weak and being walked on and walking on eggshells and all of that, right? That's on the sappy and wearing your heart on your sleeve, crying sad stories, writing love poems, all this stuff where it's very sad and pathetic, okay? On the other side of the extreme would be to be so apathetic to the world, where you are so disconnected that it doesn't even faze you anymore. Like, slap in the face, pain. Oh, you bringing more pain to me? Fine, I'll take more pain. Big deal. It doesn't even hurt me anymore. I'm numb. I'm numb to it. I'm numb to your pain. I'm numb to whatever you can do to me. My heart is so destroyed. I am so sick of feeling horrible and feeling this way and having my heart broken that I'm no longer going to connect and interact with the world. I will no longer be present. So those are the two extremes, right? But to me, what I have found is that that process of initiating manhood is to sort of join those, to meet in the middle. Actually, it's not really a joining, because it's getting rid of both of those things. It's purging out both of those things, because both of those things are weaknesses, right? They're ways of dealing with life that do not involve actually dealing with life, right? So on one hand, you're just allowing yourself to be attached to everything, to go with the flow, to be very feminine, right? That's a very feminine. On the other hand, you're not playing the game. You're not there. You're not present. You're not bringing your presence, and so you're ignoring everything. But where you want to be and where you want to focus on becoming is someone who can stand there and have that hurricane, that torrent blast them, right? And they feel it. They feel all the wind. They feel their hair being blown. They feel the fire burning their skin, their flesh. Yet they remain and they stand calmly. They feel it all. They experience all of life, but they remain firm and strong and planted in their place. They cannot be moved, even though they feel the movement, right? This is such a key difference, I believe, between the other two extremes. So I would focus on becoming that and visualizing that. That's sort of the gateway, I think, to becoming a man, to finding that path. All right, that's all the time that I have for now for this video. It's already gone pretty long here, but here's the thing. If what I'm saying resonates with you, if you have more questions, if you wanted me to go more into depth in this, I'm happy to do it. Leave some comments below. Leave me some questions. You can always email me at john@simpleprogrammer.com. I can't answer every question, but I do read them all. And yeah, I'd like to talk about this some more. I think this is a serious problem in society today. I think it's one that is unique to men today. And like I said, I've had enough people stop me on the street and basically say, hey, look, I I need some help, man. I am not feeling it. I don't feel like I have become a man. How do I initiate that process? How do I go through this process? How do I come out the other side? I've had enough of that I know that this is probably a pretty big need. So if you like this video, if you haven't subscribed already, if you want to get more videos like this one and others, click that subscribe button below. And like I said, let me know what you think about this. I'm curious to hear your thoughts and your questions on this topic. And if you've got some success stories to share, share them below and help your fellow men out if you can. There's one other thing. Well, I won't address it in this video, but I will say very, very briefly before I wrap this up that the other thing that you can do is to associate with groups of men that are doing manly activities, whether it be playing a sport or some kind of physical activity or something like that. That's also going to be something that's going to help you a lot as you're finding your way on this path. All right, that's it. I've said enough. I'll talk to you next time. Take care.